Those subtle maneuvers before the abrupt halt, and then the sudden jolt and a burst of engine thrust. That feeling of being pushed into your seat as the aircraft accelerates down the runway, and then that sensation of weightlessness during the takeoffs. Taking to the skies is always exhilarating, and as you do so, you often find yourself wondering what it would be like to be in the cockpit. You marvel at the amazing feat of engineering that aircrafts are. Some of you may also ask, will we ever get to fly on a made-in-India plane? Prime Minister Narendra Modi answered that question last month. He said India would soon be manufacturing large passenger aircraft. He added that they would also be marketed across the globe. The statement came at the foundation stone ceremony of a Tata Airbus manufacturing facility in Gujarat. The PM could have meant two things. We could convince foreign civilian aircraft makers to set up a final assembly line in India. It is an exclusive club. Airbus and Boeing form a virtual duopoly in the global market. The likes of Bombardier, Embraer and Tupolev make up the rest of the industry. Or we could design and build an Indian passenger plane from the ground up. The head of a major Indian aerospace company says that asking Airbus or Boeing to establish a final assembly line in India would be easy. A final assembly line is justified if it churns out at least 5 to 10 aircraft a month and there is an overall demand for about 120 a year. The industry expert says that level of consumption is possible between the airlines India has today, especially when the outlook for the coming decades is bullish. The Indian aviation market will need an estimated 2,200 new aircraft between 2022 and 2040, a threefold jump from the country's commercial fleet at present. That's just a shade below what all the Latin American airlines will need in that same period and about 65% of the entire Middle East region's projected demand. And while China will need almost 4 times as many new aircraft by 2040, Beijing's homegrown civil aircraft may prove to be a threat for Boeing and Airbus in that market. In the past, China also took this route. In 2008, Airbus inaugurated its first final assembly line outside Europe in Tianjin. A decade later, Boeing opened a completion and delivery center for its 737 family of jets in Zhoushan. But the industry expert from before cautions that a final assembly line will end up importing major components, as is the case for similar ventures elsewhere. He adds that it will create few jobs and lead to little value addition beyond what the Indian aerospace industry is already doing for global OEMs. For instance, Boeing sources $1 billion in products and services from India annually. While its network of over 300 Indian suppliers is growing, the company is also investing in a $200 million center of excellence in the country. Airbus says that every commercial aircraft built by it is partly designed and made in India. The company sources $650 million in manufactured parts and engineering services every year from over 45 Indian suppliers. Giving this ecosystem wings could go a long way towards building a truly Indian passenger plane. And Arvind Meligiri, the chairman and CEO of Equus, one of India's major aerospace manufacturers, has a roadmap in mind. Meligiri says that the government must ask Airbus and Boeing to significantly increase their sourcing from India. As a result, Indian suppliers will move up the value stream. According to Meligiri, this will ultimately enable India to not only assemble a complete aircraft for Airbus or Boeing, but also for itself.
We need to just ask a simple question to the OEMs. What percentage of their sales are in India and what percentage of their procurement is from India? That should be somewhere balanced there, which doesn't exist. If they can just bring close to that, we'll be so much prosperous with respect to aerospace industry in India.
Nonetheless, Meligiri cautions that it could still take 30 years for India to have its own large turbofan engine-powered passenger plane in the skies. Even Airbus and Boeing take over 10 years to execute a clean sheet program. However, the real hurdle in building a designed and made-in-India passenger plane will be the money needed. After being in development for over a decade, Beijing's first homegrown passenger jet, the C919, won Chinese regulatory approval in September. The narrow-body airliner is seen as a symbol of national pride. But one US think tank estimates that it has come at an astonishing cost. To smooth over the C919's development, the Commercial Aircraft Corporation of China may have received between $49 billion and $72 billion from the Chinese government between 2008 and 2020. In comparison, India will spend less than 3/5, $29 billion, of the lower end of that amount on the production-linked incentive scheme in key areas over 5 years. However, India need not break the bank by following China's example. That is, if it can right-size its ambitions in line with its requirements. Meligiri explains that India is not a very large country from an air distance perspective. The duration of domestic air travel is mostly under 2 hours and point to point. Thus, according to Meligiri, the ideal aircraft for India to start with would be a turboprop.
A revolutionary way of looking at it is if there is a potential of a large turboprop aircraft which can be used, could be efficient for India potentially. Because the distances are very small.
If India's aim is a homegrown passenger plane that can compete with China's, then Rossel India Director Rishabh Gupta says that the participation of both a strong government entity and the private sector will be needed. Tie-ups with global OEMs may also prove necessary. Rossel Texas was the first Indian manufacturing company to win the Boeing Supplier of the Year award. It accomplished this feat twice in the past 5 years. Gupta adds that it will be a capital-intensive venture requiring grants, incentives, and subsidies from the government. He also suggests a review of the tax structure on raw materials, which are mostly imported at present, to encourage more local content. An Indian-designed and built passenger plane will be a mammoth undertaking with plenty of turbulence likely. But the industry insiders who spoke to Business Standard unanimously believe that India has to make a start sooner than later.
If you like this video, share it and subscribe to Business Standard. For more news, views and insights, log on to www.business-standard.com. Do also follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Telegram and LinkedIn.